So ladies and gentlemen, again, you are kindly asked to put in any questions via Slido so that you can have a nice interaction with the different speakers. For this session, I'll leave it within the capable hands of George McInnes, Healthy Aging Challenge Director at ACRI. George, welcome.
So societies often chase goals that actually, when they start off, seem really, really sensible, but over time, you begin to question that. So if you just think about, for instance, steel production used to be a sign of the sophistication of a country's industry. Well, in healthcare, life expectancy has been that measure, but it's a measure that's actually outgrown its usefulness. And we've had, over the last couple of decades, people talking about the doom and gloom about increasing dependency ratios and silver tsunamis. But actually, there's now an opportunity to rethink our approach to that and reframe, if you like, the issue. And the reframing of the issue is moving from thinking about life expectancy to thinking about healthy life expectancy. And that is really what healthy aging is about. And we're at a moment where that reframing of the problem or the issue is actually a real trigger for innovation. And I'm delighted today that we've actually got a range of panelists who bring different perspectives on what healthy aging actually offers to societies, what it offers to us as opportunities for businesses to grow and seek new solutions, and make the world of the 100-year life something that actually we look forward to rather than look to in dread. So without further ado, I'd like to invite my panelists to the stage, and they'll introduce themselves once they're here. So welcome, and if I sort of run through and ask you to introduce yourself, firstly, Declan.
Yes, so I'm Declan Jones, very pleased to be here. I work for neuroscience external innovation in drug discovery and drug development for Janssen Pharmaceuticals. But I'm based not on one of our main campuses. I'm based in central London at our Johnson & Johnson Innovation Centre, where 3 of our sectors are represented. So we have pharmaceuticals, consumer health, and devices. And it gives us the opportunity to look for external innovation in all those spaces throughout Europe. We're one of the largest healthcare companies, but in pharmaceuticals, we've really focused on disease care. We have some examples where we've prevented disease and increased healthy lifespan, in terms of vaccines, and some of you may know our Johnson Baby brand, where we've been looking at both baby and maternal health care. But in most of the cases in pharmaceuticals, we're looking at disease management rather than disease prevention. And that's something that we really would like to focus on. We have a couple of examples where we've tried to focus on this in a much more holistic way. We have a recent lung cancer initiative where we've been looking at how we could actually look at use drugs, use digital technologies, use behavioral changes to be able to manage the disease, perhaps even before it is diagnosed or diagnosed in a much earlier way. So how can we preempt that disease rather than just treat it when it's too late? In my own area of neuroscience, in mental health, this is a significant issue. People really probably don't appreciate what an effect mental health can have upon disease, on lifespan and on healthy lifespan. And there was a study, a very recent study of people my age, middle-aged people, in the UK. Over the last 25 years, there's been a halving in the death rate due to cardiovascular outcomes. There's been about a 30% reduction in the deaths due to cancer, but there's been a doubling in the deaths due to suicide, alcohol, and drug addiction. And so these are all diseases which we know are associated with poor mental health. So this is something that I'd be very interested in talking about with people external to this and working with different bodies.
Thank you. Carol.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carol Longson. Recently joined the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry as their Chief Scientific Officer. Spent many years in R&D in the pharmaceutical industry, but in between those two things, spent even longer working for a public sector body in the UK called NICE. That's the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. Just a couple of maybe angles for us to think about as we explore this really interesting topic. Future-proofing healthy aging. How do we age healthily? And one word came into my mind very quickly, and that was resilience. If you think about the word resilience in terms of healthy aging, you can think of it from all sorts of perspectives. Firstly, from the personal perspective, how do we build up as citizens the resilience to stay healthy for as long as possible? So about taking control of our healthy lives. And how does the healthcare system enable us to do that in the way that it engages with us? And what are the opportunities for business in that interaction? The resilience of the healthcare system is absolutely prominent. It needs to up its game in diagnosis, early diagnosis, and the prevention of ill health. Again, presenting huge amounts of opportunities for the way that the industry, citizens, and the healthcare system work together. And thirdly, on that resilience side of things, how does government, in the way that it delivers its mandate, help, in a sense, join the dots between healthcare systems, patients, citizens, and industry to address these challenges? You've heard, I'm sure, throughout the day today and yesterday about the grand challenges. Healthy aging is one of them, and the life science industrial strategy is a really important component of that. And it might be quite useful to explore what does partnership working look like in such a difficult, wicked problem almost, as achieving a healthy life.
Well, we might well come back to that. There's a great question to pose. So, Casper.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Casper Garros. I'm responsible at Philips for public-private partnerships. And you may think, as an audience, Philips is a well-known European-based company, 120 years old. But Philips has changed lately tremendously, because you may think about televisions, lighting, household equipment, but none of that anymore. We are a health tech company nowadays, fully focusing on what we call the healthcare continuum, and that comprises of prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and home care. So that's our focus today. And I'm responsible for all the collaborations we have with the outside world, external partners, large companies, small companies, academia, within the funding environment. So like Horizon 2020, EUREKA, we will be discussing that today as well. My emphasis and also my message to you is, please look more carefully into partnership. Hugely important for us to move along, and Philips is a case in point. We've embraced open innovation already for many, many years. We're active in EUREKA already since 1985, so really that long, and also in the framework programs of the European Union. I will leave to that, and George, suppose we will come back on some of these elements.
Good, thank you.
Hi, so my name is Jama. I'm a medical doctor and founder of Symptoma, and Symptoma is a search engine for diseases. Our mission: every patient deserves the right diagnosis and treatment. And let me give you one example. Isaac, a lovely boy at the age of 3 years, with a loving personality and rather shy, one day he just started screaming for hours as if in pain. And when he wasn't screaming, he just stared vacantly into space. Isaac became depressive and suicidal at the age of 5. So terrifying thoughts of death plagued him. Whenever the word death came into his head, he would smash his head into windows and walls in order to drown out his thoughts. He couldn't go to the bathroom alone anymore because of the voices he heard in his head and the things he saw. Fears became immense and paralyzing. Over a course of 4 years, 100 doctor visits, and a host of misdiagnoses and mistreatments, his parents tried to make peace with the idea that their son might never come back again. 1 in 7 diagnoses are misdiagnoses, and each year 1.5 million lives could be saved with the right diagnosis. So what can we do about it? The medical knowledge has already been published, but it's really difficult to attain the right information in a timely manner, and there are already great approaches out there. Companies have tried to establish so-called symptom checkers since the early 70s. However, their databases are by far too small in order to provide any sufficient accuracy. So we have developed Symptoma, a search engine for diseases. Patients and doctors enter symptoms and keywords, and they receive a list of matching causes sorted by probability. And this is high technology. We have established the biggest disease database in the world, invested 13 years in research and development, and so far, Symptoma is the first and only viable solution with the by far highest diagnostic accuracy rates in this industry. On top of the search engine, we have established a chatbot which is simulating the doctor-patient interaction by asking further questions in order to narrow down the possible disease. So in this case, for instance, we entered 3 symptoms of Isaac, And the chatbot was able, within 3 questions, to exhibit another symptom Isaac had, which was, if you go to the next slide, you see it in the bottom right, that the chatbot is actually asking about visual hallucinations, which Isaac also had. So the question is, how can this help Isaac? By luck and chance alone, his parents back then came to the information that Isaac's symptoms actually match with the disease called PANDAS. And PANDAS is a rare autoimmune disorder. The treatment is simple antibiotic. And the results dramatic, because within the next day, his hallucinations just vanished and he smiled again for the very first time in nearly 4 years. Within weeks, all his symptoms just faded away. It was this little crucial piece of information leading the way to his cure, and this is what we're fighting for at Symptoma. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Jürgen Fortin. I am CEO of CN Systems. I will explain you afterwards in the case study what we are doing. I'm an engineer and I'm passionate about inventing things. This is a passion I have since I was a little child. And we have founded our company more than 20 years ago. And the idea behind inventing something for the medtech sector has completely changed. 20 years ago, I was passionate about how can we technically get some signals out of the body to measure something with a high accuracy, ideally not with hurting the body, just getting out the signal with a high signal-to-noise ratio and a high accuracy. Today, I've learned, and during the course of our company, which was not always up, it also goes up and down as other startup company also have, I have learned that we have to focus on other things. We have to focus on how shall we develop the products according to a correct treatment. What is the outcome? What is the medical outcome when we design a medical product? We have to envision this before, and we have to improve the therapeutic path. And this is the goal what we have. We have to improve the outcome, the healing of the patient, and this is the thing what we have to put in the front. And when we know that how can we improve the therapeutic path, then we have to think about how can we build up a business model around this therapeutic path. And when we have the therapeutic path, the business model, then we can start with considering some engineering things and considering some technology on that. And this is the thing what I have learned in the last 20 years. And I think this is the way how we can improve products for the aging society, putting the therapeutic consequence of the patient in front of it, and then we have also the possibility to finance it in the end. Because what we could assume is that we would not have more money in 20, 30, 50 years. So we have to take the money which is spent right now in the wrong side to put it on the right side in the correct therapeutic path. Thank you.
So, well, thank you very much, and what a great set of introductions that really sort of highlights the dimensions that we're facing in terms of looking at a new world of healthcare in a healthy aging sense. And just the whole complexity of system change, of getting the right information at diagnosis, in understanding the linkage of disease on other behaviors. I wonder, maybe Carol, because you sort of raised this to begin with, what does partnership working mean for this new world of healthy aging innovation?
It's a very good question to tackle. Just a slight diversion, because in order to think about what partnerships are going to work to try to tackle this problem, you have to start thinking about exactly what was mentioned. This idea that if you think about it from the person's perspective, what do they want of their healthcare to start with? And what they'll want of their healthcare to start with in the future to be able to stay healthy is that enabling modality. It's not just about treatment. It's about enabling the person to live healthily. And in order to do that, you're starting to think about combinatorial technologies that come together either when a person is well or when they're experience in Hill Health. So precision medicine, the targeting of treatment, the addition of that precision medicine with a diagnostic, added to that a wearable that provides feedback in real time back to both the patient and the healthcare system. So we're now talking about a very, very complex healthcare technology environment which interacts with both the patient and the healthcare system in a completely different way. So if you think about that, if you're with me in that's the future state that will enable this healthy living to occur, then the way that we partner with each other is going to have to drastically change, because it's not transactional anymore that a business talks to a healthcare system. It's a business and a healthcare system working together for the benefit of the patient. It's actually the patient being at the heart of driving what those sectors are talking about. And I'm not so sure that we have those types of partnership models quite well developed yet.
That's actually really
That's the challenge.
So here we are in a Global Innovation Summit, and in a background where I think scientists have been used to international collaboration, the benefit of working across institution. But maybe, Casper, if I could sort of ask you from a business perspective, what does this sort of new world of collaboration mean for you, and the mechanisms that have to work to bring that benefits about?
Yes, George. So first of all, of course, academia is clear. They have been collaborating across the globe for many, many years among many, many institutions. For business, this has been, of course, another story, because business ultimately has to earn money. They have to be aware of whatever impact with regard to IP and with regard to employment and, of course, earnings. So if you then look to what you're saying, to the challenge we have to team up much more, because it's indeed the patients that are central. So it would require that, let's say, both worlds come more closer together. And I can specifically relate to two examples. First of all, if I look today, for instance, to Europe, to the Brussels-led Horizon 2020 program, we have a joint undertaking called IMI. This is about medicines and innovation in medicines for pharma. However, you hardly see any medtech companies involved. And that is my plea, to really have a dialogue for pharmaceutical companies and, of course, academia to team up with medtech. And we're working on that in Brussels right now as a successor of IMI. So that is looking more cross-sectoral to really have some gains in this area. But another one is, of course, cross-country. And we're here at the EUREKA event. And I already shared with you that since the inception, the start of EUREKA, my company Philips was active. And I can tell you we have had a lot of benefits from EUREKA. And just to give you one example how this works, because as a business, but also as a university, you don't know this all by yourself. It's about partnerships. It's about learning from each other. So the example I have is that in early 2010, there was a matchmaking event of one of the EUREKA clusters called ITEA in Berlin. And there was an associate professor and an SME who came to Philips with the idea of cloud-based innovation. And at that time, that was radical. That was completely new. And we thought about the idea and we embraced it. We started with a project with some more countries, Netherlands and France. It was rather modest. But if I look to today, fast forward 9 years, this is now an important business of Philips, offering platforms to hospitals and really innovate together. So my point is, this idea came from a university and an SME. It can also be the other way around, but be open to these kind of collaborations and to lobby towards your public authorities to make this happen.
So you've thrown the gauntlet down. From a medtech point of view, you think that medtech needs to play a stronger part within the innovation ecosystem that's out there. I'm going to sort of cross over, Declan, and sort of ask you about, from a really practical perspective, what are those sorts of new collaborations and business models that are needed to drive forward innovation in this space?
I think, I mean, from a personal experience, I think there's been a whole new way of working in the field of dementia and neurodegeneration. And maybe I'll give a little bit of a UK-centric, but I know that this is also the case across Europe. After the G8 summit in London, which focused on the dementia, which is a demographic time bomb, and a number of big failures from very large phase 3 trial failures for novel drugs in dementia, I think everyone at the same time, this would be the government, this would be research councils, the finance industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and so on, all agreed that no one could do this on his own. No country, no company, no institution is going to solve neurodegeneration and dementia as a result of Alzheimer's disease. And I think what happened was a whole new series of models, a relatively joined up experiment, setting up a really basic neurobiology institute, the Dementia Research Institute. Charities such as Alzheimer's Research UK set up drug discovery consortia of pharma and the charities with a view to source drug discovery programs worldwide. And really, instead of us all individually running programs, could we drive those programs forward in a pre-competitive way? The government also, as well as J&J, started a process to bring venture investors back into the fold. They'd run away from neurodegeneration. So they established the Dementia Discovery Fund, which is now a $300 million fund to fund new co-s in the new biotechs in the dementia space. And then also the Dementias Platform UK was set up for big data initiatives, but also for early experimental medicine. So there was a number of initiatives that went all the way from early biology all the way up to how can you do a much better clinical trial. And that means if you're going to do that, if industry and academia and charities and government and the finance world are going to work together, that's inherently a different new model. And essentially, we all have to learn how to play well together, accepting the fact that we're sharing the risk, we're sharing the reward, but we're also losing some individual control. And I think actually this model's maybe about 5 or 6 years old now, and I think it's working very well.
So if I just capture that last point, I think you're almost sort of saying to me that the old spin-out model of things invented in universities, spun out and gone, actually needs to work differently for innovation in this space, that there's more collaboration across?
Well, I think that needs to work. That was not working simply because there were no investors willing to put money into neurodegeneration. So the Dementia Discovery Fund was to try and address that. And actually what it's done is it's brought started a lot of companies which other investors are now comfortable investing in. So that model, I think that's still an aim of what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is how can we really translate research, how can we coordinate research and actually have measurable outcomes. And I think that's really what we're trying to do with each of those initiatives.
Yeah. So making the new world attractive to investors, or drawing them in and making them aware of that.
And then maybe, sorry, to the point that Carol made, and then how do you bring big entities like NHS, how do you bring those bodies in to actually help with the phase 3 and phase 4 clinical trials?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If I could just make one point on this, because it's just bringing out two characteristics that maybe we could explore. The first characteristic is it's a big problem. So dementia is a big problem. It's a problem that everyone feels that they want to engage with. And the second thing is the model of working is not business as usual. It really does take everybody to be able to come into the conversation and think about not just what they're bringing, but perhaps have to give some of those things that ordinarily they would want to protect themselves. I'm talking just as much from the private sector as the public sector, but the public sector as well, to be able to work on the challenge itself. So that's then elevated to a complete change in the way that the actors interact with each other. And I really do think for these grand challenges, that's what we're going to have to do. And you know that UKRI, Innovate UK are trying very hard to create the types of systems and vehicles to allow that to happen.
So that's interesting, because that picks up on something that Jürgen was saying in introduction about the value. Actually, I'm going to turn to Yama and sort of, so what are the solutions in this space? What are people looking at in terms of the technologies that would enable this new world to actually take off?
Yeah, so if you want to live healthy as long as possible, I think the biggest it seems that medicine is rather a gamble as of now, applied as a gamble. So if you consider a cancer patient and the doctor has to say, okay, this is the best possible treatment for you, but it has only 30% chance of success. So this in turn for me means that we don't really understand cause and effect yet. You don't understand this specific patient good enough in order to say, okay, this one treatment is going to help you 100% of the time. And this is what precision or personalized medicine means. And I think this is one of the core issues, that we are applying medicine rather in a subjective manner. So while we have the big science behind and the high technology in the front, there's always one doctor and a patient, and there's at this point, the decision is being made rather on a subjective basis. And I think having this shift of paradigm to say, okay, we need to assist the doctor with data in order to broaden the horizon and to actually make decisions that are based and backed by science. This is one of the biggest challenges to come, and of course, therefore, we need all stakeholders, medtech, IT, pharma, doctors as well, and patients.
So there's a big precision component to what you were talking about in terms of better targeting of resource, better understanding. It strikes me that there's also, when we move away from the strictly interventionist thing, there's a whole behavioural piece that's associated with what we're doing. So I was wondering if you'd be able to say something about how innovative products ought to be designed and approached with that in mind.
Yeah, there was a completely paradigm shift in the last 10 to 20 years. 10 to 20 years ago, when you brought something on the market which could measure something, let's say a cardiovascular signal or a brain signal or doesn't matter what kind of signal. If you can measure something and bring it to the market, the doctor will buy it because they have the money, and it would be interesting for the doctor to measure this or that. So at the moment, this does not work anymore because you don't get the money for this device unless you cannot claim that you can improve medical outcome for that. If you can't improve medical outcome, so if you only have a measurement device, yeah, then you had the wrong focus on it. You need to focus, as I've mentioned already before, on how can we help the patient better? How can we bring him out earlier from the hospital to a healthy way of living outside the hospital, for example, or helping him with his chronic disease by giving him the right drug at the right time, for example, and not just measuring blood pressure without any therapeutic consequences. So, and if we focus with the design of our therapeutic relevant medical devices, which must follow, of course, all of the standards, what we have to do. So we are not talking about fitness things or something like that. We are talking about medical grade devices. When we do so, then we can improve his or her life, his or her lifespan, healthy lifespan, and not doing, as you have mentioned before, gambling to look what's could happening in this when we go in this direction or if we go into that direction. When we go in the correct direction, we gain money because we do not go into the wrong direction, having someone under medication for a year or 2 or 3 or 5 without any concrete need of a medication or for other therapeutic consequence. So this is the thing where we have to focus on, and then we will also have the money for the development and also have the money for the companies selling those devices with the correct business model.
So we've got a very complex ecosystem building. In the way that the UK has defined a healthy aging grand challenge, it's to achieve 5 extra years of healthy independent living. The difficult bit is the bit that I always say comes after the comma, which is comma while reducing inequalities. Where does reducing inequalities fit in terms of the development ecosystem that we're sort of trying to put in place? That's an open question to anyone on the panel who would like to
The biggest inequality might be gender, but not in the way that we know of, because if you look even in the industrial world, men are dying 8 years earlier than women are. And this is still unknown why this is the case. So this might be one of the inequality. The other main factor, of course, is money. Money is linked to health, like no other factor as well.
Just a couple of thoughts. It's a difficult nut to crack, the inequality issue, and it's a really important one to address. But again, maybe thinking about it in a slightly different way could help. And this takes me back a little bit to when I was working at NICE, in that if you're thinking about introducing new technologies, more often than not, it's those that are more knowledgeable that would understand how useful that technology is. But sometimes, in thinking about the behavioral change that needs to happen, in order to be able to realize the value of the new technology, the new medicine, it's much more holistic than just about the technology. So if you're thinking about business and industry as wanting to be as useful as possible, what you've got to start thinking about is business actually, as they're doing, as you're hearing today, being interested in the whole system change, not just in the change that's needed for that particular technology. And so if you think about behavioral change, it's in industry's interest to be interested in behavioral change, because that optimizes the effectiveness of that particular product. It also creates headroom for innovation, because you're being more efficient with the delivery of that healthcare. So in a sense, it's thinking about not having the current silos as we have, industry, the healthcare system, inequalities, but thinking about what is the outcome that we want to achieve, which is the delivery of the most efficient healthcare at lowest cost. How can we all play our part in doing that, and in doing so empower patients to actually be able to engage with this very, very new, complex world? And I think that new technologies are going to actually help more with the inequality agenda than we think, if we can only unlock that potential. And it's unlocking the potential that's going to be the most challenging discussion for us all to have. So just a slightly different way of thinking about things.
So just a reminder to the audience, you are able to ask questions if you'd like to, and we'd welcome those questions coming through to us. While that's happening, I would actually invite the panel to sort of stop and just think about what more could governments be doing to accelerate innovation in this sector? And are there particular areas that you think we should be encouraging governments to focus on?
Yeah, you can also reverse that question. Of course, there are many cost questions also for governments. If you now look to the United States, where hospitals get a penalty for readmission. You know, if a disease is coming back at a particular person and it could have been prevented, they get a penalty. So they're, for instance, reaching out to business to help them addressing this issue. And then what you see in the United States, that home care, and especially telehealth, is much more advanced, or getting much more advanced than in Europe, because it's a larger homogeneous market with a true impetus. Whereas we look to Europe, or the EU, you have 28 different countries with different standards. So that's something for us, of course, to work on, what I already alluded to with regard to partnerships, very important.
So that's financial models helping, stimulate an industry and the right behaviors. Still throw this open, yes?
It seems that the market is dysfunctional. So it also refers to what you said, Kasper. So if you imagine you have a car and your engine is broken, you go to a mechanic and he charges you 2,000 British pounds and the car is still broken. What happens in healthcare, you go to the next mechanic and you pay him as well, this car is still broken. You go to the third one, to the fourth one. So the challenge in healthcare in particular is that you don't have an accountability for outcome. And this might be also the reason, this might stem from the fact that people as such are too complicated to understand on an objective level. So it's hard to say, okay, this readmission was because of this mistreatment or because you have done something wrong. the hospital in this case might also say, okay, this is another case. It's not the same case. It's not a readmission, it's a new admission.
Any final sort of points on that?
I mean, maybe just as a healthcare user, you know, that I think it'd be really interesting to see. People may not be aware, but I guess the NHS and social care budget has been dissolved in the Manchester region, and I think that's a way of testing the model, moving away from the payment by procedures instead of payment by results. And actually, if you can keep people healthier longer, the welfare costs, the social costs are reduced. So I think we do need to redesign the system as you've described, I think, and then we have to, as industry, have to respond to that.
So certainly that's an ecosystem measure which is enabling a much more innovative ecosystem.
Yeah.
Well, that's
two really quick things. In the UK, we've got a life science industrial strategy. We've got sector deals. The government has done a huge amount to work with business to do that. What we need is implementation of that as fully as we can, because if we do that, it won't just be good for the healthcare system and patients, it will be good for UK PLC.
And that's a message for governments right around the world. So the final bit of our panel session, I'm going to invite Jürgen to stand up and present his case study.
Thank you very much. This morning I've learned that we are a scale-up company with growing more than 20% per year. When we started, we were a startup company almost 21 years ago, and we have started in a small laboratory above the kitchen in the hospital in Graz, and where we have developed our first products in there. And then sometimes I got an email from one of these guys next to the astronaut at nasa.gov, and he wrote me an email, said, hey, I've read your scientific publication. Is it true that you can do something like that? And I wrote back, Houston, we don't have a problem. Then he wrote back, how much will be this device? And then I had my first big decision as a CEO. We were considering about 250,000 Austrian shilling. You remember, maybe? This was at the time about $25,000, and I thought, oh, NASA. And then I wrote back $35,000. Then he wrote back, then I purchased 2 devices. And then we had a funny summer, because then we have to build the 2 devices for NASA. And so we brought it over there, and they used it for testing astronauts before they fly to space. Some years later, we got the Staatspreis for Innovation, which is a state prize. Then we were nominated as a high-tech pioneer by the World Economic Forum. We also applied for Horizon 2020. In phase 1, we were the #1 out of almost 200 companies. Phase 2 was not that successful, so we applied then here for the EUREKA process. And finally, in 2016, the Chinese guys took our technology up to space and used it in the space station Tiangong-2. Today, we have about 35 employees. We make more than 5 million euros on revenues, and a nice EBITDA of more than $1 million. So, what exactly we are doing? We are monitoring for every heartbeat all of the necessary cardiovascular parameters. No? Okay. First, we started with the task force monitor. This was the device we have built for NASA. It's a cardiovascular expert system, what we mainly sell into the research world. And as we sell it to the research world, the researchers make a lot of publication out of it. So at the moment, we have more than 750 publications, scientific articles. Sorry about this sign here. Okay. This also is used for the assessment of syncopes when the people are fainting, and that's the reason why we put them on the tilt table. But as you can see, this is a big device, a research device. The company called EUREKA came to us and said, can you make this a little bit smaller? And we said, of course, yes, we can make it a little bit smaller. And then we make a CNAP module out of it and build a Linux computer around it and make a CNAP monitor out of it. What is CNAP? CNAP stands for Continuous Non-Invasive Arterial Pressure. We have here this CNAP finger sensor, what you can see here. The CNAP finger sensor measures continuously for every heartbeat the blood pressure. Not only the blood pressure, the systolic and the diastolic, we get a completely signal compared to a signal where you insert a catheter into the arteria here, not venous, arteria. So we have the finger blood pressure signal, and then we calibrate it to an upper arm cuff reading, and then we have a blood pressure signal which is centralized. That means this is the blood pressure close to the heart, and with this we can do the following things. First of all, we can also use the signal to calculate cardiac output, stroke volume, and all other mechanical cardiovascular parameters. Stroke volume means how many milliliters of blood does the heart pump with this entire heartbeat. And then we can calculate all mechanical parameters, and from the rhythm, what is inside this blood pressure, we can also calculate very interesting things like stress factors and from the brain, as well as fluid content during operation and something like that. So, with these algorithms and with these sensors, for this we got a good breakthrough in the cardiovascular patient monitoring. But first of all, we had to make the big thing. We had to prove that it's clinical accurate. We have to prove it. We proved it in more than 1,000 patients in different scientific studies, and also for the cardiac output. And once we had this, and this slide was, let's say, really expensive. Once we have this, and once the doctor can use our devices, and he does it correctly, then the doctor can reduce complications during surgical procedures. So the anesthesiologist, this is the comparison to the standard treatment when he used the goal-directed therapy coming out from the CNAP monitor, can reduce 1/3 of all complications following in the next days after the surgical procedures. Mainly coming from the reduction of infections. You may think, why can we reduce infections when we measure blood pressure and cardiovascular signals? The reason is, at the moment, the doctor does not know how many fluid he or she shall give to the patient during the surgical procedure. So normally they're on the upper side, so they give normally too much fluid to the patient. When the patient has too much fluid, the wound is swelling a little bit, and then the swelling goes back, and then the surgical surgical thing goes out a little bit, and then the infections come into the body. And so if he or she, the anesthesiologist, does it correctly, you can really reduce the infections, but also some other complications on that. And you can also, of course, reduce the amount of hypotensive phases, also phases where you have a low blood pressure, lower than 65 millimeters of mercury. And the first is the absolute time we can reduce within these studies. We can show that the hypotensive phase was reduced from 27 minutes down to 12 minutes. This is really a lot. You have to try and hold your breath for 12 minutes. Is still many things for that. So, with all of these studies, we got now a big cooperation with a company called Bauschen, and this is a company that belongs to the Swedish Getinge company with about 3 billion euro turnover per sales. And this is a thing what we will introduce to the market in 2 weeks in the European Society Congress of Anesthesia. This will be the CNAP mouse, a completely new sensor system where Getinge has invested about 8.5 million into this project, and we also put another 3 million into the CNAP mouse project. And what we are also working on that, alone at the moment, not with Getinge, we have invented a new technology for a wearable solution. This is the medical grade wearable CNAP2Go sensor. The sensor measures, we are replacing all of the pumps and valves and air hoses from the real CNAP system by a mathematical model using a software. The fingering measures continuously the blood pressure, sends it to a smartphone. On the smartphone, all of these cardiovascular parameters are calculated. Then we can submit it to the doctor or store it to make a big data analysis to help for future hypertensive treatment purposes. Because we know that about 30% of all adults will develop hypertension, and this results to 1.5 billion people suffering from hypertension on our Earth. At the moment, 1/3 is not diagnosed with hypertension, another third is diagnosed but incorrectly diagnosed, and another third is correctly diagnosed, but they were lucky because nobody knows why they are correctly diagnosed. Because at the moment, the doctor has to guess what is the right medication, and what is more important, when shall the patient take the right medication for his hypertension. This costs, sorry about that, there should be about 2.1 billion pounds per year. What are the costs to the UK healthcare system caused every year by hypertension. And now just want to go down to the EUREKA project. This is just a short thing because it's an under project. The partners are Balchen and Göttingen, and of course we make a simulator for the CNAP system and also for the CNAP to go system. The challenge is that our sales will increase. We estimate 100,000 sensors per year in about 4 years, more than 2,500 units per year. And the thing is that we have to test the equivalents for FDA and for the medical device regulatory, everything. The problem is, at the moment, you need a human finger to test the CNAP system. And what we are doing with the simulator, we can make a standardized test with an artificial finger, So, this is the solution. We can enable standardized testing for CNAP and also for CNAP to go. And we think about a breakthrough because we have patented it and have a competitive advantage. So, thank you very much. You know, CNAP, every beat counts, but also CNAP to go, hopefully, in the future. And thank you very much for listening to me.
Really, really good case study for EUREKA and the sort of collaborations that it would have. We're out of time, so thank you very much to the audience for listening to us, and I'd hope you'd join me in thanking our panel of Jürgen, Jama, Kasper, Carol, and Declan for a fascinating insight into the future world of healthy aging. So thank you very much.